resigning. You can keep calling in, but we're going to just pause right here to talk to Representative Nathaniel Moran. He's a Republican of Texas and member of the Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committees. Congressman Moran, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Just want to start with your view of Vice President Harris, her candidacy.
Well, I think this doesn't really change much in the election because what we're really focused on are policies, and there's a very divergent view of the appropriate policies here in America. Kamala Harris, as Vice President, really embraced and was wholly part of all of the Biden policies. So if we continue to talk about those issues and forget about who's the person that's actually running, then I think we actually get to what the rub is that the American people want to decide this election on. Do we want to continue to have open borders? Do we want to have weak foreign policy, weak military policy around the world? Do we want to continue to spend without regard to our debt limits? Do we want to continue to impose additional tax and regulatory burdens on the American people? I don't think that's the direction Americans want to go. I think Americans want more liberty. They want to have more border security. They want to have the sovereignty of the United States restored. They want a Department of Justice that is not weaponized against them based on their political view. Those are the issues I think that will determine this election in November.
And former President Trump at the convention had said that he was calling for unity. At least he said that that's what he would do in the speech. Do you think that his campaign has fundamentally changed and that he is more interested in those calls for unity and bringing the country together and healing the divides?
Yeah, I think so. And certainly for anybody that came as close to death as he did on July 13th with the assassin's intent, it changes. It has to change a person. And I think we saw that change at the convention where he was very introspective about the fact that it was a really divine providence that his life was preserved in that moment. And frankly, when we were on that delegation floor at the convention, you saw really this shift from being just determined to change the direction of America and defiant against the policies of the Biden administration to looking at this really as an election of destiny for his life to have been preserved in that moment. It truly was remarkable. So you can understand why his tone may have changed. And the very fact that he selected J.D. Vance, who is a fantastic example of living out the American dream, that entire convention, you noted this whole theme of living out that American dream. The working class man, the everyman, can go from wherever he is in his station in life to wherever his dreams will take him, and J.D. Vance really is a good example of that.
Several Republican lawmakers, including the Speaker of the House, Johnson, have called on President Biden to resign. Mr. Johnson said this: if Joe Biden is not fit to run for president, he's not fit to serve as president. Do you agree with that?
Well, I've had some questions about his fitness for office for some time. If you go back to, I think it was April when in Judiciary Committee I questioned Special Counsel Hur about his report and the findings that he made throughout the last year on some of the mental incapacity issues that were raised during his interviews with President Biden when investigating whether or not President Biden should be prosecuted or not for keeping those classified documents at his house. Well, during that time frame, I put up the guardianship statute for the District of Columbia and said, look, boy, this looks very familiar. The phraseology used by Special Counsel Hur compared to the D.C. guardianship statutes, there was a lot of overlap even then. So I think there's been problems for a long time, and that's another question for Kamala Harris as the vice president to answer is she was close to the president, and she continued to tell the American people, oh, he's fine, President Biden's fine, there's nothing to see here, don't worry about it. Until, of course, the bad debate performance when things begin to collapse politically. And I think it's just shameful for the Democrats to now jump on this moment as a political move and then to have the party bosses in a closed door basically undo what 14 million plus Democratic voters across the country had done through their political process, and that was to nominate President Biden.
And as you know, the director of the Secret Service has stepped down. What did you learn during the hearings this week, and what should be done going forward with the Secret Service?
Well, the first thing we learned is what led to her resignation, I think, ultimately, and that was she came unprepared to give any answers substantively to what the investigation had already revealed and to what the problems were leading up to that July 13th assassination attempt on President Trump. She was, by all accounts, from the Republican and the Democratic side, one of the worst witnesses ever to present themselves to a committee in Congress. She would either deflect and dodge answering questions, or she would simply just say, I don't know. And that's unacceptable. The American people deserve transparency and accountability in that very moment. It had been 9 days since the investigation, and she gave that committee really very little substantive information. I'm glad that the Speaker and the Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, have set up this task force to move forward to do a very quick and thorough investigation. I think internally the Secret Service is planning a 60-day investigation. Well, we're almost at the end of the election cycle by the time we get those reports back. So that was unacceptable. We know there were multiple failures on the day, determining the perimeter, putting folks where they needed to be, communicating from state and local law enforcement with Secret Service that day, and then the response time. Lots of questions to be answered. They were not answered on Monday.
And Congressman, you serve on the Judiciary Committee. FBI Director Wray will be testifying before the Judiciary Committee today. What will you be asking him about the attempted assassination?
Well, we want to continue to delve deeper and pick up where Monday's Oversight Committee left off with Director Cheatle, and that is to probe deeper about what they actually know at this point about the failures and what steps have been taken since then to ensure that corrective action has already been taken in the interim. Before we get a final report, is what's been done. It didn't take me 24 hours before I started seeing videos and getting information that was very publicly available to understand some of the things that I would have done to change the protective services around the president and to provide additional protective services to other individuals engaged in this campaign, including RFK, who had been denied such protective services. So we're going to continue to press Director Wray for more answers today. I hope he will be transparent and forthcoming on those questions, but we'll see.
Finally, I want to ask you about Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech today. Yesterday, there was hearings with the families of hostages that are still being held in Gaza. Do you think the Prime Minister has done enough to get those hostages released?
Yeah, I don't know all of the things that they've done. Of course, those conversations and those actions a lot of times happen behind closed doors, as appropriately should be done. But from the outside looking in, it sure looks like he's taken the necessary steps, the first of which and most important of which is to react strongly and quickly to bring justice to those that caused that horrific act on October 7th. Hamas should be labeled what they are, and that's a terrorist organization. We know that they are in bed with Hezbollah and they're backed by Iran. Anybody that's part of what happened on October 7th should be held to account. Netanyahu's done that very strongly with military efforts, as we've seen, and I think he has done that in the most humane way possible. There have been certainly some mistakes along the way, but I really believe that he's gone out of his way to make sure that we get those hostages back, and we continue to do as much as possible to get those hostages back before the end of this conflict.
All right, Representative Nathaniel Moran, Republican of Texas and member of the Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committees. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And we will get back to your calls and your social media posts. We've got this from Sam Musa on Facebook, who says,